thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood, and today's podcast is sponsored by Ecology Skincare, who recently featured as a collaborator in our retreat. Ecology are a paleo-based skincare company, all made naturally at home, and the products are beautiful and they're really great. We talk a lot about grounding yourself in a sensuality ritual, and her products, honestly, Crystal's products are just divine. She's got salt scrubs and natural care skin creams, and we just lap it up, don't we?
Oh my gosh, it's part of my sensuality routine every morning. And my skin, I have to tell you, I've looked for years for a moisturiser that I adore, and quite genuinely this one I feel like just makes my skin shine, and I do honestly feel amazing. That's why we got her on board, because it was an amazing product with an amazing woman
and
behind
I think
it.
for us, when we choose who we want to align with, there's got to be a lot of heart behind the business, and she absolutely brings that.
Yes, she does.
It's a particular bent around sensitive skin, which is a great fit for today's topic.
Yes.
In some way anyway, where we're talking about parenting your inner teenager, looking at specifically those teenage years, which bring up so much emotionally, but also which we know can be expressing itself through the skin. Through those troubled teenage problem skin.
Yes, so check out Ecology. So she's Ecology Skincare, Facebook, Instagram and online. Which also brings us to today. We have a very special guest, Lael Stone, who is a friend of ours with a very big history behind women's health and healing. She's a women's facilitator and coach, an aware parenting practitioner, which we've touched on many times, and also runs About Birth. So she also has a history as a doula and taking you through calm birth classes. But most importantly, Lael says her most important skill set is that she is also a mother of 3. So Lael, welcome.
Hi,
welcome, Lael.
Thank you.
So we got Lael on board today because Lael has this unbelievable body of rich wisdom, not only for children but specifically for teenagers, and has a relationship with her teenagers that I pray to the heavens I end up with.
Honestly, like some of the stories that Lael shares around her kids, it just brings tears to my eyes because they're just so moving. You know, it's your brilliance, really.
Thank you.
So we're so pleased to have you unpack these years and what they bring up for us, which is something that so much of the stuff out there doesn't do.
Yes. So we framed it as parenting in your inner teenager because Lael, coming from such a huge aware parenting background, shares the philosophy with us that parenting is more to do with how to heal and nourish yourself that proliferates out into your kids than it is doing something to your kids. And hitting the teenage years brings up so much about our inner teenager and all of the stuff that happened for us, and we almost get triggered by our kids around anything that really did happen with us during that time, which is massive. So like you even said before, it brings up all sorts of things around sensuality and sexuality and puberty and lying and boundaries and all sorts of incredible juiciness that as women we're wanting to expand and own more of, but that our children will trigger for us, particularly moving into the teenage years. But you yourself said it's not just about the teenager, it's what you put in place when they are 3 or 4 that leads into how that awakens as a teenager. Can you fill us in a bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with saying when my kids started to hit that teenage years, it dawned on me of like, oh my God, I have to do puberty again. It was like, I thought I'd done it once, but here I am, I'm going to do it again, but hopefully this time with a bit more awareness. Yeah, it's exactly right. You know, the qualities of what we want in a teenager, that beautiful communication or openness, the closeness, ideally what we all hope for is that our teenagers will come to us when there's issues, when there's problems. That doesn't just miraculously happen when they start to hit 12 or 13, that all of a sudden they're going to share. Actually, it's more the opposite, that they retreat a lot more and they move more to confiding with their friends. So if you don't already have the foundation of connection and opening and sharing, then you will find it's very, very difficult to be part of where your teenagers' world is. So a lot of what I have learned and worked with is that it's when they are 2 and 3 and 4 that you are setting up the foundation of how you want your your teenage relationship to be. So in those young years when your children are losing the plot because, you know, their Lego piece fell over or, you know, something happened to their drawing and they're really, you know, upset and having a big meltdown about it. And if you're like, oh, don't worry about it, it's just a Lego, or don't worry, you can draw another picture, really what you're imprinting with your child then is like your big feelings, they actually don't really matter. You know, and even as we're as an adult going, really, it's a picture, it's fine. But to that little 3-year-old, that picture is their world. So what we imprint in our kids when they're really, really young is that limbic story of actually mum and dad will hear me no matter what is going on. And if there's something I know, it's that when your kids become teenagers, what they need is a safety net to come back to know that whatever they're coming to you with is okay and it's safe. And the more that we can practice that when our kids are little, the better we will be at being okay with the not okay, really. And I think that as I look at it now, navigating my kids, that all those years of listening to their feelings, all those years of staying really present and anchored with them has given me such a good foundation to be able to sit there to hold whatever is happening for them as teenagers. Because as teenagers, it's a little bit more, let's just say it's a bit scarier. They have the vocabulary, which your 3-year-old doesn't, right? So sometimes I think it's like parenting teenagers is like parenting a 3-year-old, but with a better vocabulary.
A bit stronger.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That, you know.
And they can get around.
Yeah. They can get around, they're doing their thing, you know, and part of the job is really about being able to stay centered with no matter what they're coming to you with. Now, absolutely 100% guaranteed they're going to push your buttons as teenagers because firstly, as we said, it's going to push up all your unfinished stuff when you're a teenager. It's going to push up all those wounds that maybe were never met within you. And 2, they're going to challenge what your idea of how life should be. So for example, my son, he's an amazing kid. He's nearly 16.
Yeah.
So really, really smart kid, but just not into school at all. You know, it's not his vibe. Like, he's actually very, very intelligent, but he's a very physical kid. He plays soccer at a really high level. You know, he's really dedicated to his sport. He trains 5 days a week. He's very into looking after his body. But sitting in a French class, my God, he could care less, you know. And so part of my journey with him, even with schooling, is that he should be trying better, he should be getting better grades. But I look at him, and him in his own beautiful being is that school is really not for him, you know. And how do we navigate that? How do I navigate society's input of what is important or what is right, you know, is what your kid should be doing, as opposed to who he is in his own unique being? And I look at him and think he will actually just be fine in the world. I have to let go of my expectation that says you should be trying at these subjects, you should be doing it, you should be making sure these things, when in his world, that's actually not that's not that important for him. Now, we've made a bit of a deal. He's happy to get through year 12, do it. But, you know, he puts in pretty much a minimal effort. But he does it because that's the commitment we've had to each other. But as he says to me, I just can't wait to finish so I can get out in the world and do what I want to do. And I'm like, I fully support you in that, mate. Now, it doesn't look at what society says they should be doing. You know, they should be getting really good grades and go to university, or it's going to help you excel. But I look at him, who's highly motivated with his sport. He's highly passionate about what he does. You know, if that's his vibe, then that's his vibe.
You're seeing his genius.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my expectations around what I think that should look like are not necessarily what resonates with him.
The typical lens that a teacher or our parents might put on your son might be, oh no, he's lazy with his schoolwork.
Yeah, completely.
The thing is, as we talk about, you're never lazy in everything.
No.
There's areas of your life where
Absolutely.
you're incredibly driven.
Yes.
And,
yes.
you know, there's areas in your life when you're not.
Yeah,
and
completely.
that's the balance, right?
And that's finding your genius too, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is looking at those areas where you are most inspired and 200% dedicated and motivated is where that energy should, in inverted commas, be going.
Yes, completely.
Not spread out on the things that aren't your genius and therefore aren't actually going to create an inspiring, amazing life.
Yes, yes. And it's very hard, you know, as a parent, not to be influenced by what other people think, by what society says it should look like.
I imagine, particularly when you're also looking at being a mother within a dynamic of a school that is in that mindset. How do you hold on to that bubble?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, it's about taking a step back and looking at your child, and as you said, seeing the magnificent being they are. Now, my son is highly motivated when it comes to earning money. He, you know, for a long time he had 3 jobs going because he loved the idea. Yeah, totally. That's why I look at him. he loved earning money. He went to France last year on an exchange, and we said, we'll pay for your ticket. You need to pay for your spending money. So for 6 months, he worked his little butt off. He was soccer refereeing, he was babysitting, he was cleaning people's gardens, he was washing windows.
Focus and commitment and all of those things that school would say you need to demonstrate for your schoolwork in another form.
Absolutely,
which is totally
absolutely.
Okay.
And I think it's when you stand back and watch and you see what it is, then you actually go, okay, he's just doing his version of what life looks like. And I laugh because both my husband and I, we have been entrepreneurs our whole life. I started my first business at 19. My husband as well. We've never done it the way mainstream does it. Why would he do it? And so I think it's very tricky to not get sucked into what society says our children should be, and particularly for our teenagers. And I think teenagers are such a misunderstood generation, and often in my parenting talks or when I'm talking, working with birth and talking to parents about babies and stuff like that, and I talk to them about teenagers, I say teenagers are the most wonderful kids. Like, they are amazing. And most of them go, my God, I've never really heard anyone say that about teenagers. And I'm like,
why do you think that is, that no one says that about teenagers?
Because I think they've got this bad rap, that they're really hormonal, that they're rebellious, all those things, which is still true, and they still do happen. But I think, when we actually take the time to connect in with these teenagers, when we actually take the time to understand what is happening in their world, they let you in. And they are these really intelligent beings who basically see the world in a whole different way. And we could actually learn a lot from them. Dan Siegel, who wrote Brainstorm, which is an amazing book, which talks about the teenage brain, really talks about it so beautifully in that book around the fact that we actually could learn so much from teenagers. And the problem that's happened is that the older we get, the more rigid and tight we get, right? Yeah. And teenagers are the exact opposite. They're all about finding edges and new things to explore.
And the same can be said for 2, 3, 4-year-olds as well, isn't it? They're constantly asking you to come and join them in their world.
Yes, completely.
And I guess how much you join them in that world is also how much your teenager will invite you to join them in their world.
And I think the thing is that we really, what Dan Siegel talks about too, is that actually in hindsight we could actually learn a lot from teenagers, because the older that we get, the more rigid we've become, and actually what we've lost is that ability to think outside the box, to be more fluid, to take risks, because that's what teenagers are about. They're about trying to find those risks and those edges that they can do. So when we actually start to look at them in a different way, they are these beautiful creatures. Like, it brings so much joy when my son comes home with some of his mates. I mean, they're all 6'3" giants. They're huge. Like, there's never enough food to feed them. But they lump in their big smelly bodies, right? And they sit down and they actually want to talk and engage, and you talk about what's going on, and they are so open when you create the space to be open with them. I think we've become so... we think that they're just that kind of grunting, and there's times where they will be that, but the more available you make yourself to them, the more available you are to just be present, the same as what you do when your kids are little, then the more they'll come to the party, the more they'll meet you there. It's not necessarily pushing what's going on and what's happening and all those kind of things, but making yourself available. One of the greatest things, and I think my son and his mates have gotten onto this, is that if they come back to my house, I'll feed them, right? Because I'm always there after school with my kids, and I'll often cook them something warm. So all of a sudden there's quite a few of them come back. I think they've gotten onto the fact they're going to get a meal. But I actually love that, because they come home, they want to eat something warm, they sit there, they talk, they laugh, they share with what's happening in their world.
So beautiful. That's like when I picture ahead in the teenage years, that's like my fantasy. You've just, explained my fantasy.
When you said that.
I said that to Bridget.
Yeah. And I think that it's, and I mean... The more I think that we just drop down to seeing how the world is for them, right, which is really full on for teenagers these years, even more so than when we were teenagers. You have to remember that they've got the world at their fingertips now. They are exposed to everything. When we were teenagers, we were basically just comparing ourselves to the people who we went to school with, right? Yes. Now we're comparing ourselves to the whole world. So there's all that pressure about who we are we enough, all that kind of stuff. So more than ever, what teenagers need is they need that safety and that grounding of the family network, of that family that is their family of origin that is going to hold them, not necessarily their peers, but their family to hold them. And that comes through, spending time together. It's being there after school.
What does that mean for you when you say hold them? What does that actually mean?
For me, the best way I describe it is about what I call making spaciousness for my kids. And so by that I mean just being there. So it's when they come home from school, making them something to eat and just making myself available.
See, this is fascinating, right? Because if you don't have kids in school, you don't realise how imperative that 3 to 6 p.m. window is for that.
Yes.
Because our kids go to school and we go back to work.
Yes.
And then we're not home till 6:30 at night. And we've missed the most golden window for connection and debriefing from their day.
Completely.
Because it doesn't happen after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens as soon as they've come home and there's this flood of warmth that I've walked into my safety zone and they're ready.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you miss that, even when you're sitting down at dinner and you're saying, "How was your day?" You're getting nothing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think for me, the spaciousness for me is about making myself available to my children. So in the sense of that, whether it's just being there after school, making them something warm to eat, just sitting there while they're eating, chatting, talking about things. It's also about, I find because when they do become teenagers, they like to retreat more to their room. They want privacy. They want that quiet. So it's even just knocking on the door, going in, laying on the bed. My son, I find, talks the best to me when I physically touch him somehow. So I might just kind of, throw my leg over his leg or just touch his arm. Just any form of physical contact, I find he will just open up a little bit and talk about stuff. I think that it's just not that rush, which we all do, but I think creating pockets of just openness to be. And I think it's also realising too with teenagers that we, both my husband and I have a completely different relationship to both our teenagers at the moment. My son and my husband share an absolute love of soccer, so they could just sit there and talk for hours and hours about what's happening in the EPL. That's what they do. They'll often get up at 6 a.m. to watch a soccer game. They sit on the couch in the morning, drink tea, eat hot cross buns. They share this absolute passion of sport together, which they just talk about. My son and I share a different kind of connection as well. And I think that my connection, when I look at it with my son, isn't as intense as my husband's, but I go, that's okay because my husband's got it with him, whereas my daughter, maybe just because she's female, we have a whole other deeper connection than what she does necessarily with my husband.
So we haven't spoken about her. So your middle child, how old is she?
She is 12 and a half. Yes.
So she's kind of on the cusp of puberty.
Oh no, she's in puberty. She's there.
See, this is what I'm kicking into because my kids are 10 and 8, my older two, and I didn't realise. I mean, which is crazy, right? Because I'm a naturopath and studying the body for how many years, decades. Yeah. And I didn't click into the fact that puberty starts at 8.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you can start to see the changes. I mean, you can see the changes in the body, but you can just see the changes in behaviour and those kind of things. And I'd probably say with my daughter, it really has been the last year that she's really moved into puberty. And now we're right in the middle of those beautiful hormonal swings that go up and down.
See, I love even the way you frame that, those beautiful hormonal swings.
Yeah.
How do you get to the point with having the spaciousness and the grace for calling them beautiful?
Because I think it is actually just seeing it as something that is normal and actually wonderful. And I talk to my daughter about how amazing it is about what her body's doing. And she identifies it when she's having one of these big swings. She'll sit there and she'll say to me, I feel so crazy in my body. I feel like everything's overwhelming and I want to cry and I want to laugh at the same time. And you can see it in her body where she's just like, what is happening to me?
And what about the other swing with the aggression and the shutdown kind of stuff?
Well, the shutdown I don't find happens so much because when I'm finding that when my kids are moving into that, something's going on for them, it's my absolute red flag to go stay connected to them, be there, be with them. So I'll call it, I can see that you're feeling really big at the moment, or I can see that you're feeling really angry. I'm going to just hang by you, I'm going to be with you. What do you need right now? And sometimes she'll be like, I need you to go away. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes. I'm going to come back and check with you, And often when she's saying I need you to go away, she's actually not really meaning that. She's kind of like, I'm saying that, but I actually do still want you to stay close.
So this is interesting. So this is your boundary of, okay, I'll respect that by giving you a couple of minutes, but I'm coming back in case that's shifted. Or
I kind of come back. I'm going to stay close because I know it can feel really scary when you've got lots of big feelings, and when you've got lots of emotions. So I'm going to stay connected with you. I mean, the number one thing I find to ride out these big hormonal swings is about staying centered and anchored in yourself. If you start to get reactive at all with your children, then it just fires.
Well, it just goes into shut down. You shut down, they shut down.
Yeah, and doesn't go anywhere. So your job, your 100% of your work is about, am I anchored and how am I? So interestingly enough, with my son, I rarely get triggered with him. Like I might have little edges that come up and I think, is that okay? But I don't usually have a big fiery response to him at all. With my daughter, because she's pretty much the carbon copy of me, I am a lot more susceptible to being really reactive, you know.
So what do you do in those spaces?
So look, to give you an example, probably a few months ago, one of the things that my daughter does when she's feeling really, you know, big with feelings is she gets stuck and she just won't move anywhere. So she's like, I can't do it. I can't do my homework. I can't get dressed. I can't do anything. She just freezes and gets stuck. And it completely pushes my buttons because it's exactly what I used to do when I was a teenager.
Oh my God, this is like me and my daughter.
Yeah, okay.
This is like you're like my perfect mirror.
So
Okay.
she, and the first 1 or 2 times it happened, I got really triggered and I found myself going, just move somewhere, just do something, you know, which is so not me to yell. Like it's very, very, you know, I know that I've reached an edge when I'm yelling because I don't really yell at all with my kids. So, you know, that happened once or twice with her where she was really stuck, and it was a really big red flag to go, well, there's something going on for me here. I really need to find out what this stuckness is with me. And so I just basically sat with myself and kind of did a little process to go, okay, so when I was 12 and I was stuck, what happened? And what happened for me was nothing. I just had to be in my stuckness. No one helped me. No one listened to me. No one really saw what I was going on. I don't feel like anyone understood. And so my reaction to my daughter was really my pain that I actually didn't get what I was offering her, which was empathy and holding and understanding. So I got that little juicy part for myself, and I had a bit of a moment with my 12-year-old, inner 12-year-old going, oh yes, I see you, and nobody listened to you, and had a real shift within myself. Then the next time my daughter did it, I had no reaction. I just sat there. I made myself really spacious for her, and by that I mean I just made sure my body was really available to her. It's very hard to explain on a podcast, but I'm showing you now. I just opened myself up, so I'm really available to her.
It's like opening that chest space and not having arms folded.
Just being there.
It's a physical openness as much as it's almost a breath work.
Completely.
That dog is driving me bonkers.
It's just that there was holding. That's all I was doing. I was holding her, and basically her stuckness moved so beautifully. Like she was just mirroring really what my stuff was.
So once you could get present with yourself at that age, you were no longer needing to be plugged into her. Completely. She didn't need to reflect that to you anymore.
Absolutely. And she moved. She completely moved. Her stuckness moved. And then we had really beautiful conversations around when you're feeling stuck, I said to her, what do you need from me? What would help you? What do you think helps you? And I have to say that since we navigated that was a few months ago, she actually hasn't been stuck ever since. You know, she'll catch it in a slight moment if she feels overwhelmed. She'll say, I feel overwhelmed. Can you help me? And then it'll move.
And so when she's saying, can you help me, what are you exactly doing? Is it that spaciousness? Or
it's just that I'll be like going, okay, tell me what you need. Let's write down what you're feeling overwhelmed with. You know, so she might be like, I've got to do this job and I've got to do this. Or, you know, sometimes we write it down. Sometimes it's just in the listening. Sometimes it's making a bit of a plan. Okay, what if we do this, this and this? Does that help you feel a little better around what it is? It's just, I mean, here's the beautiful thing. Kids actually have all the answers they need. So often I'll say to her, what do you think you need to do? Tell me what you see as what we should do to help navigate this. And she'll come up with it and I'll go beautifully.
Because they're so deeply connected to their intuition and they know what they need, don't they? You know, much better than often we do.
Yeah.
Just giving them the space to connect that for themselves.
Yes. And I think that the teenage thing too, because there's so many factors within it. We've got the hormonal factor, you know, and if we tap back into when we were teenagers, most of us felt completely misunderstood. We thought we were completely on our own. We kind of clung to life to our friends because they were going through it, but probably most of us didn't really have that true heart open connection with our friends. There was often a lot of jealousies, particularly as girls, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, that would tap us into feeling quite alone. You know, we're navigating our changing bodies. We're navigating sexuality and the opposite sex. We're navigating homework and pressure to be something and succeed. Like there's so many factors that we're looking at, and then you throw the internet on top of, you know, today's teenagers as well. There's all these incredible factors that we can get plugged into, or that we did get plugged into, or that we can get plugged into as our teenage navigates them. And, you know, and the biggest thing I find too with the whole teenage thing is that the process as a parent is about letting go. Now, most of us are not very good at letting go at all. We like to hold on pretty tight. But what your teenagers ask of you is to let them go and be in the world, to go and be and find who they need to be. And one of the biggest things I've said to our son, we've always said to our son, the world is actually an extraordinary place. It is so amazing, and it is full of rich, rich adventures. And we want you to go out there and explore the world and be part of it. And you are going to make many mistakes. You're probably going to fuck up.
Totally fine.
You're probably going to do that, and that is good because that's going to serve you. And what we want you to know is that we are always here. We are your anchor place for that.
And that point you make there brings you back to the age of 3 or 4. Like a woman in our community is, going through those feelings of, her first child turning 4, and that feeling of, my little girl's growing up, and that sense of, pain almost of knowing what that represents. And it's the same thing again, isn't it, in the teenage years?
And you know what it is? What I find is actually incredibly damaging is if we try to hold on to our teenagers, if you try and hold on to them, you're trying to keep them safe and controlling them.
But don't you think that's when you're holding on to yourself as opposed to holding on to them? That they've become the vicarious living structure of you, and you're holding on to a part of you that's wounded that you have not yet dealt with.
And because most of us are told our whole life that the world isn't safe and things can happen, and our biggest fear as parents is that something happens to our child.
And trying to protect them is really just trying to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's why we get triggered so much and we blame the other child.
Yes,
which you see is a classic thing a lot of in schools. There's kind of that sense of the other child in the wrong, whereas in fact it was really about how do you empower your child.
Absolutely.
To be shifting that dynamic that's going on.
So on that, when we're looking and viewing this world and with so much more information and access that our children have access and people have access to them in such a broader capacity, how do you coach parents through that process of letting go when they're stuck in the fear of if I let go, something bad will happen?
Well, it's a big one, and it's an absolute personal journey of dealing with your own fears. Last year my son went to France, and this was the first time he was going to be away from me for nearly a month. And he was going with school, so I knew there were people there going to be looking after him, but it was like my baby was going. And the lead up to it, I could feel the anxiety about him going. I could feel my own fear around what if something happens to him. So I had to really sit with, okay, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing that can happen is that he dies. That's our biggest fear. And then I sat with myself and went, and if that is his journey, then that is his journey. I can't control that. That could happen him riding his bike to school. It could happen in France. It's huge, but it is part of the journey of letting go. Because the opposite of that is to be in so much fear, and energetically you're projecting that fear onto your kid, right? Which is not good, because then the child grows up with the world is not okay, the world is not safe. And therefore then that's what they're attracting into the world. If we're looking at that whole energetic vibration of what they're doing, that's what they're going to bring to themselves. So part of the work is about learning to let go and let them fly. And it is the hard. This is why you want to practice from when they're 2 or 3, because the process is about learning to let go.
And it's the small steps to get you. It's not the massive leap.
Yeah.
It's right what you and I were talking about. Go as slow or as fast as the slowest part of you. It's the same thing with letting go.
And they are meant to fly. They are meant to individuate. They are meant to go and find who they are in the world. And when we hold on to them and we spend all this pressure trying to control their world or make sure this is okay, then really what we're doing is we're limiting them from finding. Now, that's not to say that you don't have boundaries and you don't have structures that feel good for your family.
So talk to us about that. Talk to us about boundaries as a parent and boundaries of a teenager pushing those and
what that looks like. So we have rules in our family, which is, 1, always got to be respectful. That's my baseline. Are you respectful to yourself? Are you respectful to someone else? And if we're disrespecting ourselves or someone else, then we need to have a conversation around that. The second thing is, for our son, it's and our daughter, we just want to know where you are. So that's part of our rule. We don't mind where you go within consideration, but we just want to know where you are. And, you have to be home at a certain time. And really, our biggest thing is about honesty and integrity with each other. And they're just the basic principles we've instilled in our kids from a really young age, And we don't have many other boundaries around that, in the sense of that you just go out and be in the world, but that's our holding for you, right? And so I have to say, for a nearly 16-year-old son, there really hasn't been many edges or boundaries he's pushed at all. I think in him, since being through puberty, there's been once where we've had really big words around something. I can't even, he wanted to go somewhere and we didn't feel like it was appropriate for him to go, and that just was a really big catalyst for some massive feelings. So my husband and I just kind of held that. It was tough, but we held it. Apart from that, we haven't had slamming doors, or, our thing is always about communication. So like I shared with you on Saturday night, my son actually did lie to us about where he went, and so my mother intuition beacon was going off, and so was my husband's, and we were like, okay, well, I think we know he's not where he says he is. And so he came home and we asked him again, where were you? And he said where he was, and I said, do you want to try again? And he goes, yeah, I was actually here. So the thing wasn't to me that he lied, the thing was why did you lie? And so then I said to him, why did you lie, buddy? And he said, well, I went to a girl's house, I went to see this girl, and I like this girl, but I didn't want to tell you because you guys get so excited when I'm talking about girls, with girls, and I don't want you to make a big deal about it. And it was actually beautiful, and the three of us were laughing, my husband and my son and I. We were actually, to set the scene, we were all laying on our big king-size bed, arm in arm, having this conversation about it. And I absolutely looked at my son in the eye and I said, I completely own that I probably haven't honoured your boundaries around that and your privacy around that, and I will absolutely honour to do that, and I'm sorry if you haven't felt that it's safe enough. I feel like I'm actually let you down by not creating safety around that, because we've had lots of big conversations in our house about sexuality and about not having any shame and all those kind of things. So I realised the thing that I was trying to create, I was actually over pushing. So I pulled back, I owned that. And then he owned, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have lied. And so then I just went, so what have we both learnt? And I said, I've learnt that I'm really going to respect that for you. And he learnt, well, I won't lie, I'm sorry. And then we basically all just laid there kind of giggling and laughing about certain things. And then I did, as I said to him, what do you reckon would have happened in other families? And he said, I would have been grounded for sure. And that beautiful thing I said to him is, and what would have that done? And he said, it just would have made me lie better. And in that moment I just looked at it and thought, something that could potentially be a big deal that other parents would be very triggered about, I actually looked at it as an opportunity for learning, for healing, for us to go, what's going on here? It doesn't need to be yelling. There doesn't need to not be communication.
Crucial steps that you've done in that. One is not moved straight into your trigger. You've looked at instantly, it's not in our version of equilibrium and boundaries. So why? So you've moved beyond what's happened to the why has it happened. That's the first crucial step, which you've then invited him into the discussion of.
Yep.
And then your second crucial step is you took ownership of your role in that.
Yep.
Even though you didn't tell him to lie, or you didn't, whatever. Yeah. You've taken ownership of your role in his feeling like he needed to, which are two massive steps that in general mainstream unconscious parenting, and look, we're all guilty of it too, it's not like we can be conscious all of the time, happens.
And here's the beautiful thing about this, because then we opened up this lovely conversation about girls and having them over and feeling comfortable in our house, and so we had this beautiful candid conversation about that. And then the next day he's like, oh, can she come over? And then she came over, and the last few days she's been over in our house. All of a sudden she's here, it's open, it's
moment, right? So you also don't want to do away with any of these little stumbling blocks on the journey, because they can be a massive pathway to awakening and deeper connection.
Beautifully.
So, and conversations that otherwise there's no
wouldn't
reason
have happened.
to have.
So in fact, him lying to you in that moment was actually an enormous benefit for you all getting to that next stage.
Completely. And I think the thing is too, we have said to our son, all our kids from a young age, when you're in balance, and you also can feel when we're out of balance, right? So most parents, when they are firing off at their kids, it's because they're out of balance. And we have said to our kids from a very young age, if you see mum or dad and we are out of balance, you have to call us on it. You have to say you are not talking from your heart, right? So even as a 10-year-old, I remember having this conversation with my son, and I'm like, and really it's probably more so my husband that will sometimes turn into his father, that knee-jerk reaction, we become our parents. So sometimes my husband will turn into his father and start talking like Papa Gal, as my son calls him. And at those times, what my son will do is going, you sound like Papa, which is that trigger for my husband to go, oh my God, I'm completely out of balance and I'm talking like my father, who would often be a bit full on.
Those moments, then?
Who?
Your husband.
He'll get it. it actually snaps him out of being really reactive, right? So we have to remember too that our default most of the time is to go back into who our parents were or how we were parented.
Yeah, all that patterning.
Yeah, completely. And so one of the big things I've always said to our kids is that we, as empowering them to actually call us on our crap. Like, how amazing is that? Can you think about if you were a kid and a teenager and you knew your parents were acting out of fear and irrationality, and you actually could stand there and say, Mum, Dad, you're actually not in your truth here, and I don't really feel like you're honouring me or honouring yourself. Like, can you imagine? Yeah. And so, again, that's what we've been really instilling in our kids, is that this is a mutual relationship here. And we are making this up as we go along, right? That's what we say to our son all the time. We're learning as much as you are. So when you feel that we are not in our integrity, then you have full permission to call us on that.
And I mean, that to me is really practicing that idea of your children being just as much of a teacher to you as you are to them.
Absolutely.
And demonstrating that.
They are more of the teacher than I am to them, without doubt, because they've come into my world to help me move through and process all the stuff that I haven't really haven't healed or navigated. And I think that that practice too of really saying to your kids, you are your own authority here. And you know what it feels like to be in balance and what it doesn't, and you know when we are and when we're not. So I give you permission to call that.
That's a huge responsibility. Sometimes I think about when I get into the headspace of overwhelm, I don't know if I could have the spaciousness to even tolerate, or not tolerate, but to actually really take, like you're saying your husband goes, oh no, it snaps him out of it, whereas I'm thinking, shit, if my kid really did that to me and I'm in that reactionary out of my body phase, I'm there because I'm in overwhelm, not because I'm in my consciousness of holding a particular energy.
Yes.
I don't know that I could do it like that
so quickly.
But maybe it's not even about the snap, it's about just that, whoa, I need a time out here, because they're calling me to say, Mum, you're not actually all right.
Yeah.
And that even in that moment, it's like, okay, let's walk out of the room, let's take a deep breath, let's go outside for a minute. That really is about, let's come back to what's going on here, which is that.
And that's, I guess, the way that you do that is about being open about what's going on for you. Like, I'm sorry, it's some big stuff. I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm feeling really frustrated right now.
Yes.
And role modelling how to get back into your body.
Yeah.
And look, this is not so much when your kids are little, because they're navigating and learning how to be in the world. I find that as a teenager, though, that this is something that's really important, because it is about that mutual respect. And I think this is where a lot of the stuff with teenagers falls apart, is that they are actually really smart, intelligent, incredible beings who actually are seeing the world in a whole different way, and we could learn a lot from them. I mean, what they need actually as teenagers is they need to know that somebody is there who's got them, who's got their back, who's got them no matter what is going on. I'll share one more quick little story that I think I've told a lot of people that really, I think, moves them greatly. One day when my son was in year 8, what had actually happened is his best mate had gone to a different school, and he was actually feeling incredibly lost and sad that his mate had gone. And anyway, so something happened in the class. He got in trouble for something. I think he probably had a bit to play within it. He sent me a message from school that basically just said, I hate school, I'm never going back, right? And I remember going, oh, okay, something must have gone down. And so he said, I'm coming home now. So I basically had this moment of like, right, he's coming home. How am I going to deal with this? What's going on? And what happened was he walked in the door. We have this long hallway, and I stood at one end of the hallway, and he walked in, and he was clearly distressed. And I looked at him and I said, there is nothing you could have done that will not make me love you. There is nothing you could have done that is not going to make me support and hold you. And he just burst into tears, and he came running up to me, and he just hugged me. It makes me even teary talking about it.
It's making me too.
And we basically sat on the couch, and he had a big cry, and I was like, tell me what happened. And he told me what happened. And then again, why? Why do you think that went on, mate? And he said, this and this and this.
That is the loving of your children in the trenches, isn't it? Is that it's not this concept of when you're good and happy, I love you, but when you're raging and angry and ugly, I don't love you.
Yep.
It's this concept of I will hold and witness you in your darkest moments so
Absolutely.
that you know
I've got you.
And you asking the why too, as opposed to you going into advice mode immediately.
Yeah.
It's just you simply providing the space.
Totally. And I just said to him, I've got your back, mate. I've totally got your back. Whatever you've done, you'll have to be accountable for, but I've got you back, right? And so we had to actually go back to the school that afternoon to talk to the teacher about it. And he's like, I don't want to go. I'm like, I know you don't want to go, but I'm going to be right beside you and I'm going to be with you and we'll be accountable together, right? So we went back and I said, all you need to do is own your part, speak your truth, da-da-da. So we went in and the teacher kind of said, look, this is what's happened. What do you think you need to do to repair? That's what she was saying to him. He said, I think I should do this, this and this. And then I just said to the teacher, and I said to my son, why don't you tell her what's been going on for you? And then my son burst into tears and just said, my mate left. I'm really lost without him. And then the teacher just went into beautiful empathy. I can see how hard that is for you. And this moment that could have potentially been really like, why are you not behaving and what's going on, was just so healing and magnificent. And we walked out of that meeting and I looked at him and I go, are you right, buddy? And he's like, yeah. He just gives me this smile, which is just that knowing, I've got you. Yeah, and it was magnificent. And
they're the memories you just keep somewhere in your soul, aren't they?
Because again, I'm looking at the whole bigger picture of helping our children is to help them understand that we love and accept them no matter who they are. And that when children feel that, it gives them the launching pad to go and be in the world and be who they really are in the world, not just the good boy or not just the good girl or not just the rebel, because that's what they've been labelled themselves as, but be the true magnificence of who they am, because that holding place says, I completely see you.
And when you do that for them, what are you actually doing?
And for yourself.
You're doing it for yourself. So to be able to really look at your child in those deep, dark moments and see the mirror, which is in some way you, and say, I love and honour your magnificence in that full spectrum. How fucking powerful is that as a woman wanting to own and embrace all of who she is and create a life that
completely
is inspirational?
Yeah, because you have to remember, right? We can say things to our kids, we can try and get them to do things. Their learning and their imprint comes from our behaviour. So if you are not authentic in your being, if you are just saying words but not living them, then that's what your kid's going to get. So the more that you go into your own journey, the more you look at your own crap, the more free you become, then that is what imprints in your children. That is the work. It doesn't kind of matter what we say, it's what we do. It's what we do and how we're choosing to live in our own being is how you create these magnificent children.
Yeah,
that's the work.
Now, Lael, I feel like we've got so much more because I really want to open up the conversation on sexuality because so many of our tribe have reached this point in motherhood where all of a sudden they're disconnected from their seductress, their sensuality and their sexual self. And yet so much of that I see as part of that story of that emerging teenager and what is holding and wounding there. So I would really like, if you're willing to stick around, to do a second podcast that really delves into other aspects of our teenagers plus our inner teenager. Are you happy to stick around for that?
That's my favourite topic.
So for our listeners, this will be part 1 of you and your inner teenager. And next week we will be doing part 2 where we really go deeper into the woman's story of awakening as part of her inner teenager. So we would love to wrap it up with Bridget connecting with you on...
suburbansandcastles.com, and our film coming up in April is Future Dreaming. So it's looking all about how we've got so out of touch with the way that nature operates and we're trying to force ourselves upon the natural rhythm of the world.
And when is that on?
That's the 13th of April.
Good. And to connect with me is on thepleasurenutritionist.com, and to connect with us is on Facebook. What are we? Nourishing the Mother. Yeah. We are working on our website at the moment, so that will be up soon with a whole heap of resources and amazingness. So until then, please check out our Facebook. Please rate us on iTunes. We love your emails and seeing how these ripples are really awakening aspects within you and your lives. So please share with us because it certainly keeps us going and with your tribe.
So until next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.